Hello, Ms Stallings class. We are going to read the rest of Ms Kraft is Daft. I was just thinking, I told everybody after he left, maybe Ms Kraft isn't a real substitute teacher after all. What do you mean? Asked Alexia. Well, I said, maybe she's just a clown who ran away from the circus. People don't run away from the circus, Ryan told me. They run away from home to join the circus. Well, what about this? I suggested. Maybe Miss Kraft murdered our real substitute teacher at the circus and came to our school so nobody would know what happened. Then she would get away with murder, Neil said. I saw that in a movie once, said Michael. A guy murdered somebody, then pretended to be the guy he murdered so nobody would know the guy was missing. That's ridiculous, Andrea said, rolling her eyes. You're just trying to scare Emily. I'm scared, said Emily. AJ might be right, said Alexia. I don't think Miss Kraft is a real substitute teacher. What if she didn't murder our real sub? What if she kidnapped our real substitute teacher and has her locked up at the circus in a cage with a lion? Stuff like that happens all the time, you know. Yeah, said Michael, and the lion is probably pacing back and forth right now, wondering why a substitute teacher is in his cage. I bet that lion is hungry, said Ryan. We've got to do something, shouted Emily, and then she went running out of the room. Jeez, that girl will fall for anything. After Emily left, Alexia told us that at her old school, the kids used to play tricks on the substitute teachers. What kind of tricks? I asked, instantly interested. Like, we would all drop our books on the floor at the same time. The substitute teacher would be talking, and then suddenly there was a loud boom. It was hilarious. We should do that, said Ryan. Yeah, said Michael. That could be cool. I'm not going to do that, said Andrea. You heard what Mr. Klutz said about behavior. You're going to get in trouble. You might get suspended. Not if we all do it, said Alexia. They can't punish all of us. Everybody except Andrea agreed that dropping our book at the same time was a great idea, and that Alexia should get the Nobel Prize. That's a prize they give out to people who don't have any bells. Let's all drop our books on the floor at exactly 1 o'clock, Alexia said. It was going to be hilarious. I couldn't wait for 1 o'clock to come. Chapter 8, The Great Kraftini. When we got back to class after lunch, Miss Kraft was wearing a top hat and a black cape. That was weird. I looked at the clock. It was 12:30. Just a half an hour until the big book drop. Did you have a nice lunch, Miss Kraft? Asked Andrea, the big brown-noser. Who's Miss Kraft? Asked Miss Kraft. I'm the great Kraftini. Watch this. She snapped her fingers. There was a big puff of smoke, and the empty desks in front of the room disappeared. Cool, we all yelled. How did you do that? Asked Alexia. Oh, a magician never reveals her secrets, said Miss Kraft. Can you make Andrea disappear? I asked. Oh, snap, said Ryan. That's mean, Arlo, said Andrea. Kids learn fast when you combine teaching with magic, Miss Kraft told us. Here, I'll show you. Grab this rope, AJ, and tie me up. Tie you up? I asked. Are you sure? Sure, I'm sure. Go ahead. Make it really tight. I wrapped the thick rope around and around Miss Kraft until she was completely wrapped up from head to toe. Then I tied the ends together tightly. There was no way she could escape. Excuse me, said Andrea. What could we possibly learn from this? A lot, said Miss Kraft. While I try to escape from the ropes, I want you kids to write down the 50 American states in ABC order. If I can't escape in 5 minutes, then you don't have or you don't have all the states in order, 100-pound weight will fall on my head. We all looked up at the ceiling. There was a big weight hanging over Miss Kraft's head. Ask your teacher if you can try this at your school. We all looked up at the ceiling. That's crazy, yelled Neil, the nude kid. Please don't do this, Miss Kraft, begged Emily. It's very dangerous. I must do it, said Miss Kraft. It's the only way you'll learn. Hurry, the clock is ticking. Alabama, the first state is Alabama. Somebody write it down. Emily grabbed a sheet of paper and a pencil. Everybody started yelling out states. Alaska, I yelled Andrea. It's Alabama, Alaska, Arizona, Arkansas. What's next? Wyoming, I yelled. No, dumbhead, said Andrea. Wyoming comes last. I knew that, I lied. California, shouted Michael. The next state is California, and then comes Colorado and Connecticut. Emily wrote the states down as fast as she could. Miss Kraft juggled to free herself from the ropes, but I had wrapped them pretty tightly. 4 minutes left, shouted Alexandria. We racked our brains to put the states in ABC order. Delaware, Florida, Georgia, Hawaii, Idaho. This was hard to do. Hurry, Emily shouted. 3 minutes left. Everybody was freaking out. We've got Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Kansas. Miss Kraft couldn't get free from her ropes. She was grunting and sweating. Kentucky, shouted Andrea. Then comes Louisiana. 2 states, 2 minutes left, shouted Neil. We've got all the M states, Maine, Maryland, Massachusetts, Michigan, Minnesota, Mississippi, Missouri, and Montana. 1 minute left, Ryan shouted. Hurry. Nebraska, Nevada, shouted Alexia. And then all those new states, shouted Neil. New Hampshire, New Jersey, New Mexico, New York. We were running out of time, and there was still a lot of states left. In a few seconds, the 500-pound weight was going to drop on Miss Kraft's head. North Carolina, shouted Andrea shouted. North Dakota, Ohio, Oklahoma. 5 seconds left, shouted Ryan. There's no more time, shouted Andrea. Oh, no. I closed my eyes so I wouldn't have to see the 500-pound weight fall on Miss Kraft's head. That's when the most amazing thing in the history of the world happened. You never believe who walked into the door at that moment. Nobody. It would hurt if you walked into a door. But you never believe who walked into the doorway. It was Mr. Klutz. What's going on in here? He hollered. Why is Miss Kraft tied up with a rope? Who did this to her? Everyone looked at me. AJ, shouted Mr. Klutz. Why would you tie your teacher up with ropes? Is that any way to show respect to a substitute? What did I tell you about behavior? But, I said. Everybody started giggling because I said but, which sounds like but, even though it has one less T. I'm keeping an eye on you, young man, yelled Mr. Klutz. You're this close to being suspended. I wanted to go to Antarctica and live with the penguins. 9. The Big Book Drop. Oh, don't worry about him, Mr. Kraft, said Miss Kraft after Mr. Klutz left the room. I know how to take care of principals. She also told us the 500-pound weight wasn't really going to drop on her head, and it wasn't 500 pounds either. It was made out of cardboard. She said she knew we would put the states in ABC order faster if we thought a 500-pound weight was about to drop on her head. Ryan and I untied the ropes around Miss Kraft. So she had played a trick on us. It was okay, because we were about to play a little trick on her. I looked at the clock. It was 12:45. 15 minutes till the big book drop. Okay, everyone, Miss Kraft said. It's DEAR time. DEAR stands for Drop Everything and Read. We all have to read silently for a half hour. Ugh, I hate reading. We all took books out of our desk. I had a book about fighter planes that I got from the school library. Reading it wasn't much fun, but the pictures of the fighter planes were cool. It was hard to concentrate on my book anyway, because all I could think about was the big book drop. I checked the clock. 10 minutes to go. I turned around to look at Ryan, Michael, Neil, and all the other kids. Everybody was reading silently. Miss Kraft was sitting at Mr. Granite's desk, reading a book called Magic Tricks for Dummies. I moved my pile of books to the edge of my desk so it would be easier to drop them on the floor. It was going to be hilarious when we all dropped our books at the same time. 5 minutes to go. I could barely even look at my books about fighter planes. It was almost 1 o'clock. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Ryan pass a note to Michael. I figured he was reminding Michael to drop his books at 1 o'clock. There were only a few minutes left. Kids were snickering and whispering and passing notes back and forth. I looked at the second hand on the clock. It was sweeping around the dial. This was going to be hilarious. The second hand was getting closer to the top. 12 minutes left to go. I got ready for the big book drop. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6. This was so exciting. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 1 o'clock. It was time. I pushed the pile of books off my desk. Boom. My books hit the floor and Miss Kraft jumped in her seat. Ha ha ha. I looked around. Nobody else had dropped their books on the floor. What? Everybody was looking at me. I probably don't need to tell you who walked in the door at that moment. It was Mr. Klutz, of course. What was that loud bang? He asked. Arlo dropped a bunch of books on the floor, Andrea said, a little smile on her face. Why did you do that, AJ? Asked Mr. Klutz. He looked mad. I thought everybody was going to drop their books at 1 o'clock, I explained. That was the plan. The plan, Mr. Klutz said? You planned to have everyone drop their books on the floor? Is that your idea of fun? One more stunt like that and you'll be suspended, young man. But, everybody started giggling because I had said but again. Chapter 10, Getting Suspended. Oh, wow, Mr. Klutz was really mad, and so was I. When we went out for recess, I gave everybody a piece of my mind. Well, I didn't really give them a piece of my mind. If I did that, I would have less mind for myself, but I told them how angry I was. How come you guys didn't drop your books on the floor at 1 o'clock? That was the plan. We chickened out, Ryan told me, so we called off the big book drop. Why didn't anybody tell me you were calling off the big book drop? I asked them. I thought you told AJ, Ryan said to Michael. I thought you told AJ, Michael said to Neil. I thought you told AJ, Neil said to Alexia. I thought you told AJ, Alexia said to Ryan. Nobody told me, I yelled at them. And now, if I do one more bad thing, I'm going to get suspended. What does being suspended mean anyways? Asked Alexia. It means you get kicked out of school, I told her. Kicked out of school, she said. So you won't have to go to school anymore? That's right. Hey, that means you get to stay home and watch TV, Ryan told me. Sounds pretty good to me, said Michael. Yeah, said Neil. I wish I could get suspended. You're lucky, AJ. That can't be right, said Alexia. Are you sure that being suspended means you get to stay home and watch TV? That's when Emily and little Miss Know-It-All walked up. Hey, Andrea, shouted Ryan. You know everything. What does being suspended mean? I'll look it up, she said cheerfully. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a little dictionary. I guess she carries it with her wherever she goes, so she can look words up and show everybody how smart she is. Andrea leafed through her dictionary for a minute until she found the right page. Ah, here it is. Suspend. To hang. Suspend means to hang. So if AJ does one more bad thing, Neil said, Mr. Klutz is going to hang him. What? I yelled. I don't want to be hanged. Sorry, dude, said Alexia. It's in the dictionary, so it must be true. I wonder if the past tense of hang is hanged or hung, said Andrea. Who cares? I yelled. Yeah, either way, it's going to hurt, said Neil. I wonder if Mr. Klutz is going to hang you by your feet or by your neck, AJ. If you get hung by your neck, your head might fall off, said Ryan. Yeah, but if you get hung by your feet, all the blood rushes to your head and it explodes, said Neil, the nude kid. It's been nice knowing you, AJ, said Ryan. This was turning out to be the worst day since TV turnoff day. Chapter 11. The most amazing trick ever. When we got back to class after recess, there was a long wooden box in the front of the room. It looked like the kind of box that they use to bury people. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, Miss Kraft announced. Are you ready to witness my most amazing trick ever? Yeah, everybody shouted. No, I said. What's the matter, AJ? Asked Miss Kraft. I thought you liked magic tricks. If Mr. Kraft catches me doing one more bad thing, he's going to hang me, I told her, so I don't want to be involved in any more tricks. Don't worry about Mr. Klutz, Miss Kraft told me. I know how to take care of him. So what's your most amazing trick ever, Miss Kraft? Asked Neil, the nude kid. I'm going to saw one of you in half. Cool, we all shouted. Sawing people in half is just about the coolest thing in the history of the world. Where did you get that big box? Asked Ryan. At a big box store, said Miss Kraft. Okay, which one of you wants to get sawed in half? Me, we all shouted. Not me, said little Miss Perfect. I don't like violence. What do you have against violins? I asked her. Not violins, Arlo, she said, rolling her eyes. Violence. I knew what violins and violence were. Violins and violence were two different things. I was just yanking Andrea's chain. Okay, said Miss Kraft as she opened up the lid of the box. The student who gets to be sawed in half will be Andrea. Yay, everybody shouted except Andrea. Please come up to the front of the room, Andrea, and climb into the big box. Andrea looked really mad. She was the only one who didn't want to get sawed in half, and now she was going to be sawed in half. Ha, nanny boo-boo on her. At first I thought she would refuse to do it, but Andrea always does anything a grown-up tells her to do, so she went up to the front of the room and climbed into the box. There was a hole at one end for her head to poke through. Are you comfy? Miss Kraft asked. I want to make sure you're comfortable before I saw you in half. Yes, Andrea said, but she sounded like she didn't mean it. She looked like she might cry. Miss Kraft went to the closet and took out a saw. It was gigantic. Eek! Andrea screamed as she looked at the saw. Don't worry, Miss Kraft assured her. This won't hurt a bit. I'm scared, said Emily, the big crybaby. Miss Kraft started sawing the box. Sawdust was flying everywhere. Andrea closed her eyes. The saw dug into the box. You should have been there. I'm the great Kraftini, shouted Miss Kraft as she pushed and pulled the saw back and forth. Help, shouted Andrea. Stop! We've got to do something, Emily shouted, and then she went running from the room. Phew, this is hard work, Miss Kraft said after a few minutes of sawing. She wiped her face with a tissue. Then she wiped Andrea's face with a tissue. Can we stop now? Andrea begged. Stop, said Miss Kraft. I'm only halfway done. You know what they say, if you start a job, you should always finish it. Miss Kraft went back to sawing for a few minutes and then stopped again. I'm tired, she said. Who wants to take over for me? Me, everyone shouted. AJ should take over. He hates Andrea more than anybody. It was true. Nobody hates Andrea more than I do. Sawing her in half would be the greatest moment of my life. But I knew what would happen. I'd start sawing Andrea in half, and then Mr. Klutz would walk in and suspend me. Everybody started chanting, AJ, AJ, AJ. Would you like to finish sawing Andrea in half, AJ? Asked Ms. Kraft. I really wanted to saw Andrea in half, but at the same time, I really didn't want to get in trouble again. I was forced with the hardest decision of my life. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to do. I was concentrating so hard that my brain hurt. AJ, said Ryan, if you don't want to saw Andrea in half, that must mean you're in love with her. What? That's right, said Michael. AJ, you can prove once and for all you're not secretly in love with Andrea by sawing her in half. Let me out of here, Andrea shouted. I don't want anybody to saw me in half. Okay, I finally agreed. I'll do it. Yay, shouted everybody except Andrea. I went up to the front of the class. Miss Kraft handed me the saw. Are you sure it's going to be okay? I asked her. Sure, I'm sure. Go ahead. I've done this trick 1,000,000 times. Nothing can go wrong. I started sawing the box. Help, help, shouted Andrea. Don't do it. Stop, Arlo. The sawdust was flying, and Andrea was screaming, and everybody was hooting and hollering. This was the greatest day of my life. Ooh, Ryan said. AJ is sawing Andrea in half. They must be in love. When are you going to get married? Asked Michael. If those guys weren't my best friends, I would hate them. Help! No, stop, shouted Andrea. I was almost finished sawing through the box, and you'll never believe, in 1,000,000 years, who walked in the room at that moment. I'm not going to tell you. Okay, I'll tell you. But you have to read the next chapter, so nanny boo boo on you. Chapter 12, The Return of Mr. Granite. Okay, so where were we? Oh yeah, I was sawing Andrea in half while she was screaming and begging for me to stop. That's when guess who walked into the room? Mr. Klutz, and he was madder than I'd ever seen him. I thought his eyes were going to pop out of his head, like in the cartoons. AJ, he shouted, grabbing the saw out of my hand. What are you doing? Nothing, I replied. If you get caught doing something really bad and somebody asks you what you're doing, always say nothing, even if you have a giant saw in your hand and you're about to saw somebody in half. That's the first rule of being a kid. Sawing students in half is not acceptable behavior in school, Mr. Kraft yelled. That's it. I warned you several times. AJ, you're suspended for the rest of your life. What? I didn't do anything, I shouted. Miss Kraft, tell him this was all your idea. Then the most amazing thing in the history of the world happened. Miss Kraft snapped her fingers. Well, that's not the amazing part, because anybody can snap their fingers. The amazing part was that when Miss Kraft snapped her fingers, a big puff of smoke appeared where Mr. Klutz was standing. And when the smoke cleared, Mr. Klutz was gone. Sap, just like that. We got to see it live and in person. You should have been there. How did you do that? We were all asking. Where did Mr. Klutz go? A magician never reveals her secrets, Miss Kraft said. I told you I would take care of Mr. Klutz. Well, that's pretty much what happened. We didn't see Mr. Klutz for the rest of the day. I don't know where he went. When I got home, my mom had a snack waiting for me in the kitchen. How was school today? She asked. Did anything interesting happen? Nah, I told her. School is boring. You say that every day, AJ, my mom said. Interesting things must happen at school sometimes. Nope. Well, I wasn't going to tell her that Mr. Granite almost died, or that I tied up Miss Kraft, or that I sawed Andrea in half, or that Mr. Klutz suspended me and disappeared in a puff of smoke. When I got to school the next morning, Miss Kraft was gone, and Mr. Granite was back in our classroom. He wasn't sneezing and honking and blowing his nose anymore. Okay, everybody, he said, turn to page 23 in your math books. I've been waiting all year to do this lesson, and today we're finally going to do it. Mr. Granite, we did page 23 yesterday. Nice try, AJ, said Mr. Granite. I know you're just trying to get out of doing math, like always. No, he's telling the truth for once in his life, Mr. Granite. We already did page 23. Yeah, everybody shouted. Is that so, said Mr. Granite. Well, if you kids think you're so smart, what's 11 times 11? 121, we all shouted. What? Said Mr. Granite. How did you know that? Mr. Bongo taught us, said Ryan. He's a sock puppet. That's when Mr. Granite did the weirdest thing in the history of the world. He went over to the window, opened it, and jumped out. Maybe Mr. Granite will come back to class someday. Maybe we'll find out where Mr. Klutz went. Maybe people will stop blowing their noses into garbage cans. Maybe we get to bungee jump in the all-purpose room. Maybe Miss Kraft will stop running into doors and juggling brains and pulling handkerchiefs out of her nose. Maybe Mr. Bongo will become a real teacher. Maybe I'll throw my nostrils under the table. Maybe our real sub will escape from the lion's cage at the circus. Maybe we'll do another book drop. Maybe I'll get another chance to saw Andrea in half. Maybe I'll be able to talk my parents into letting me go to clown college. But it won't be easy. The end. I hope you guys all have a fabulous Thanksgiving. See you after Thanksgiving break.